चलो Good evening, everybody. Today our last topic in term 2 series, biodiversity and conservation. So let's move to our lesson. So everybody like, share and subscribe the channel to get the all information and all new videos. The subtopic of today's part, the biodiversity. The concept, pattern, importance and the loss of biodiversity. Then biodiversity conservation, hotspots, endangered organisms, extinction, red data book, sacred groves, biosphere reserve, national park, wildlife, sanctuaries and Ramsar sites. As usual, in our marks division section, chapter 13 we completed yesterday, now the chapter 15. So let's complete this part. Moving to directly to our lesson part, biodiversity. So biodiversity is the term popularized by the sociobiologist Edward Wilson. That is popularized. So mark it, popularized. But actual, the term biodiversity was first coined by W. Rosen. W. Rosen in 1985. Later it is popularized by Edward Wilson. So biodiversity, the variation as observed among the organisms in a habitat or a different ecosystem, that is known as biodiversity. So in the conference of Rio de Janeiro, the little biological diversity, a definition is proposed. So according to the Rio de Janeiro definition, biodiversity represents the variations among the organism with respect to species, community, or ecosystem as expressed in all types of ecosystem, either aquatic or terrestrial. So this is the Rio de Janeiro definition. So are you completed all? We are moving to the next page. So the concept of the biodiversity, the different types of biodiversity are there. So considering to the structural property of an organism, biodiversity may be classified into three types. Number one, genetic diversity. So every organism has a genetic basis for the characteristic feature. Therefore, the variation between organisms or variation among species are based on the genetic makeup of the entities under consideration. Such variation in the genetic makeup. So variation in the genetic makeup is called the genetic diversity. So this is the diversity in the number and types of genes as well as chromosomes in different species. And their alleles in the same species. On the average, a bacteriophage, basically we see, in bacteriophage there are 100 genes. In mycoplasma, that is 450 to 700 genes. In Escherichia coli, there are 4,000 genes. In our Baker seeds, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, there are 6,000 genes. So that vary in different. And in our human, the Homo sapiens, that is 30,000 to 40,000 genes. So the variation in the genes of a species increase with increase in size and environmental parameters. That results the formation of polymorph. The ecotypes, the races, the varieties, the subspecies. So genetic diversity is useful in adaptation to changes in environmental condition. You all know the medicinal plant like the Rauwolfia serpentina growing in different Himalayan ranges, showing differences in their potency and concentration of active chemical. So the active chemicals that are originated from Rauwolfia serpentina, that is reserpine. One of the well-known medicine. So that is due to genetic diversity. Next one, the species diversity. Species diversity, suppose the Western Ghat have great amphibian species diversity as compared to the Eastern Ghats. So species diversity is the variety in the number and richness of the species of the region. So remember, in this arena, one important term, that is species richness. It's a very important. It is species richness. So what does it mean, species richness? That is the number of species per unit area. That is the species richness, very important term. And another important aspect, so you can change the color. The species evenness. Species evenness, that is number of individuals of different species represent the species evenness. That is the species evenness. It is also called species equitability. The third category, so that is ecological diversity. So ecological diversity, that is also called community and ecosystem diversity, and that is of alpha, beta and gamma diversity. So I think you all remember the alpha diversity, beta diversity and gamma diversity. Alpha diversity, that is within the community. It is a species diversity that is in the given community or habitat. Beta diversity, that is between community diversity. And gamma diversity, the diversity present in ranges of communities as represented by diversity of habitats or ecosystem over a total landscape or a geographical area. So moving to the next, number of species in Earth and India. So it's a pure informational page. You can remember this one. According to International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, the total number of plants and animal species described so far is slightly more than 1.5 million. Remember this one. A more conservative and scientifically more than, so the estimate made by Robert May places the global species diversity at about 7 million. So more than 70% of all species recorded are animals, while plants, including algae, fungi, bryophyte, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, all are comprising no more than 25% of the 22% of the total. So among animals, insects are the most species rich taxonomic group. Making up more than 70% of the total. That means out of every 10 animals on the planet, 7 are insects. Very important information to remember. See the pie chart. That's a very important information. We have to remember this pie chart. See, the first one is related with invertebrates, second one for vertebrates, and this one for plants. So look at here, invertebrates, the largest part is occupied by the insects. Now the invertebrate, the 50% are occupied by the fishes. In the plant group, see the fungi, and the largest one is the angiosperms. There's the fungi, then algae, the mosses, ferns and alleys, and the lichens. So keep it into mind. That's very important to remember, and these are frequently asked given the pie chart and ABCD and getting the information from you. So although in India has only 2.4% of the world's land area, it shared the global species variety that is 8.1%. Nearly 45,000 species of plants and twice as many of animals have been recorded from India. Applying the proportion to India, in diversity figure, we estimate that there are probably more than 1 lakh plant species and more than 3 lakh animal species yet to be discovered and described. Now the patterns of biodiversity. First, the latitudinal gradient. See the diagram. So everybody draw this one. So this is the number of ant species, and this one northern latitude. So look, so the latitudinal the diversity of ant species with the change of latitude. How this one, the getting change. So this is an ideal example of latitudinal change. So the little biodiversity the biodiversity is very little at the poles. It increases in the temperate areas but reaches the maximum where the biodiversity is maximum. So that is from 23.5 degree north to 23.5 degrees south. So every time this is the maximum biodiversity are there. So why it is there? It is because the tropical rainforest have favorable environmental condition, but not only for speciation but also for supporting both variety and number of organisms. So is it clear? Now the another important thing, the species area relationship. Look at here. That is by Alexander von Humboldt, species area relationship graph. The German naturalist and geographer, while exploring the wildness of South American jungles, found that within a region, the species richness increased with increasing area, but up to a certain limit. This relationship between species richness and area turned out to be the rectangular hyperbola. The rectangular hyperbola for a wide variety of taxa, whether they are birds, bats, fish, freshwater fish, or flowering plants. So, on the logarithmic scale, it is straight line, and we can write the log S equal to log C plus Z log A. Here the S is the species richness, Z is slope of line, or the regression coefficient. and C is the y-intercept, that is the y-intercept, and A is area. So here the regression coefficient Z generally the value of Z 0.1 to 0.2, regardless of taxonomic group or region. So draw the diagram, draw the graph carefully. So moving to the next part, the mega diversity countries. The mega diversity countries, see the 12 mega diversity countries are there. Australia, Brazil, China, Cambodia, Ecuador, and now India. And the number of mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and number of angiosperms are shown in the chart. Indonesia, Madagascar, Malaysia, Mexico, Peru, Zaire. So these are the different mega diversity countries showing the lot of diversities, and their number of species are also shown here. So take a screenshot for further reference. Now the importance of species diversity to the ecosystem. So the species diversity are needed due to stability, so biodiversity is essential for stability of an ecosystem, for productivity, ecosystem with higher biodiversity are more productive than ecosystem with lower diversity. So higher diversity, that means the tropical forest, they show the higher biodiversity, and that is the higher, and the temperate, that is the lower biodiversity, and higher biodiversity is showing more productivity. Number 3, ecosystem health. In ecosystem health, biodiversity is essential to maintain the health of the ecosystem through the occurrence of various checks, controls, negative and positive feedback. In this concept, the ecosystem health, all the species are interlinked through various types of relationship. That's very important key line. You have to remember this one. All the species are interlinked through various types of relationship. So killing or disappearance or even a few species may have a destabilizing effect. In this arena, the eminent scientist Paul Eldridge proposed the river popper hypothesis. For the effect of decrease in biodiversity of an ecosystem. So think about this one. We are traveling, many of us, in an aeroplane. Like the ecosystem, so we are all in the, has thousands of species. Here the rivet, misspelled is there. Rivet. So the rivet here there denote the different species. So removal of the rivets, that means if we remove the species by the passengers, may not affect flight safely in the beginning, but the plane will become dangerously weak over a period of time. So the removal of the rivets of the critical part of the wing, suppose the species performing major ecosystem function. So when we remove the rivets of the wing, that means the major species, we pose a very serious immediate threat to safety. This is the concept of rivet popper hypothesis. So is it clear to you all? The rivet popper hypothesis? It's a very important, as a short note, it can be frequently asked. So we are moving to the next. So by the loss of biodiversity, we are facing the different problem. So now the question is, due to human interference, the world is facing the high rate of species extinction. So there are four major causes, and these four are called the evil quadrant. These four are: number one, habitat loss, and fragmentation. Number two, over exploitation. Number three, alien species invasions. And number four, co-extinction. So remember this one, these are very important. Besides the distribution, the disturbance and degradation, the pollution by eutrophication, the intensive agriculture by destruction of the forest, and the economically important trees are going to cut in forestry. These are all the different reasons for the loss of biodiversity. So moving to the next part, the hotspots. Hotspots are the areas characterized by the high concentration of endemic species. Remember this one, the endemic species. Experiencing unusual rapid rate of habitat modification loss. Norman Myers first defined the hotspots, that region that harbor a great diversity of endemic species and at the same time have been significantly impacted and altered by the human activities. The hotspot is the region that supports at least 1500 endemic vascular plants. That is 0.5% of the total global, has lost more than 70% of the original vegetation. So there are 35 biodiversity hotspots in the world. India is the home of biodiversity hotspot by ENVIS, environmental, that is environmental information system network. These are the Himalaya, but we say the eastern Himalaya, mainly the eastern Himalayan region, western Ghats associated with Sri Lanka, Indo-Burma and the Sundaland, that is the Nicobar Islands. And there are other parts of the world, but Indian, the Nicobar group of islands are under the Sundaland. See the different hotspot zones of India. The Himalayan zone, mostly the eastern Himalaya, western Ghats, Indo-Burma and the Sundaland. So these are the zone, the 4 Indian hotspot area. Remember this one, it's a very important thing to remember, the name and the location. Now the different cause of the extinctions. So there are mainly 3 types of extinction. The natural extinction, mass extinction and anthropogenic extinction. It's a very important question in this year. Remember this one for our term 2. Natural extinction. So it's a slow process of replacement of the existing species with better adapted species due to change in environmental conditions, evolutionary changes, predator and diseases. A small population can get extinct sooner than the large population due to inbreed depression. Mass extinction, the earth is experienced the mass extinction due to environmental catastrophes. So remember this one, 90% of the shallow water marine invertebrates are already disappeared. Anthropogenic extinction, they are abated by the human activities like hunting, habitat destruction, overexploitation, urbanization and industrialization. The dodo of Mauritius are already extincted. So these are the human activity, that is the main reason. Now the biodiversity conservation. So we are facing the problem of that lot of species are going to extinct. So we are going to conserve themselves and taking the different types of strategies. So biodiversity conservation. So the strategies are taken that all the threatened species be protected, priority is given to one belonging to the monotypic genera. Those are endangered, those are vulnerable. They are given the priority. All possible varieties are conserved. Wild varieties of all economically important organisms, they must be conserved in protected areas. Wild varieties need to be protected. So mostly the wild relatives of all economically important organisms that should be identified and conserved in the protective areas. The critical species, the critically endangered species are to be protected and identified, and they should be safeguarded. And life supporting system that is the arrangement of water in nearby zone giving to the priority. Lot of international organizations are also working in this manner. So we are going to the in situ and ex situ conservation to conserve the biodiversity in different ways. See, the biodiversity conservation in situ and ex situ, the protected area network sacred groups, biosphere reserve, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries. Biosphere reserves are in terrestrial and marine. In ex situ, the sacred plant home gardens, here seed banks, gene bank, cryopreservation, minus 196 degrees Celsius in the liquid nitrogen, botanical garden, zoological garden, arboretum, aquarium, all are there in ex situ conservation. So this is the another question. You can go through this one. In situ and ex situ conservation. What is in situ conservation? That is on-site conservation. That means when the Royal Bengal tiger are conserved in Sundarban, that is in situ conservation. And the conservation strategy involves the placing of the threatened animals and plants in special location, that is ex situ conservation. That means when Royal Bengal tiger are conserved in Alipur Zoo, that is ex situ conservation. So in this process, the protected and endangered plant and animal species in its natural habitat, either by protecting or restoring the habitat itself or by defending the species from the predators. In ex situ, it helps the recovering the population. Those are in the verge of extinction. The national park, the biosphere reserve, wildlife sanctuaries, these are the in situ conservation strategies. And the zoological parks, the zoos, the botanical garden are the common ex situ conservation programs. So is it clear? Everybody can show your response. Under the conservation mode, the sacred group, that is what are sacred group, that is Khashi and Jaintia hills in Meghalaya, Aravalli hill of Rajasthan, Western Ghat regions of Karnataka and Maharashtra, and Sarguja, Bastar areas in Madhya Pradesh. In Meghalaya, the sacred groups that last refuges for the large number of rare and the threatened plants. Now the international effort, not only India, the whole world are going to conserve the biodiversity in their different way. Biodiversity knows no political boundaries. We are making boundary, but biodiversity does not maintain this way. And its conservation is therefore collective responsibility. Nations are there. So the historic convention of biological diversity, that is called the Earth Summit, Rio de Janeiro 1992, very important, called upon all the nations and take appropriate measures for conservation of biodiversity and sustainable utilization of its benefits. In the follow-up, the World Summit, the development held in 2002 in Johannesburg, the second summit you can say, 190 countries pledged their commitment to achieve by 2010 a significant reduction in the current rate of biodiversity loss at global, regional and local levels. So the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species by Washington Conservation, it is drafted that for resolution adopted for the meeting IUCN in 1963. It came into force in 1975, the CITES, the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species. So it aims to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants should not be treated. They are not to be threat to the survival of the species in the world. So in according varying degrees of protection, 35,000 species in the animals and plants. So it's a very important worldwide organization. ZSI, Zoological Survey of India, that is 1916th organization, to promote survey exploration and research, reading the advancement of our knowledge of various aspects of biodiversity. They are taking some objective by exploring the survey, monitoring the funeral diversity, periodic review, preparation of RDB and fauna of India, biological studies on selected of important species, maintenance of the National Zoological Collection. So, Zoological Survey of India take a good step for the conservation and its measures. Now, the another important aspect, that is the Red Data Book, RDB, 1963 by IUCN. Is formulated red data list of threatened species in both plant and animals. All are there in RDB. See the extinction, critically endangered, endangered, vulnerable, endangered to unknown extent, rare species, warning list, no endangered, they are not endangered, data deficient, and not evaluated. So up to this, they are in the risks of extinction, this group. And from there, they are the, till date, they are out of restriction. So Red Data Book is trying to create the awareness. So we should be aware which species are already missing, already extinct, and some are on the verge of extinction. This document establishes the keeping records on rare and endangered species, and that should be preserved, the plant and animal species in the different regions of the country all over the world. Now moving to the end of our lesson. See, we have to read the importance, the pattern, magnitude of diversity, the hotspots, the level of biodiversity, the concept, the extinction, the different extinct species, the endangered organism, cause of biodiversity and loss of biodiversity, and the different threats of biodiversity. So these things are the main important concept to remember, to prepare ourselves for the upcoming term 2 examination. So I think everybody having a good revision of this chapter. Now we are ready for term 2 test. I think you all do the best in the end of our journey of class 12 board exam. Wish you best of luck in the term 2 exam. Thank you and good night. Bye everybody.